Hi, everyone. This is Jackson Steger, and you're listening to Campfire, a new limited series podcast from Cabin. Campfire is a show that seeks to understand how decentralized organizations achieve wildly ambitious and creative goals. Each week, we're joined by different DAO leaders and operators who share the tips, tricks, and tactics that they have used to build community and ship product. Today, we're joined by Jess and Nicole from Seedclub. Jess helped start Seedclub, and Nicole leads their accelerator program among many, many other roles in her position as educator. Seedclub is a DAO that builds, supports, and invests in tokenized communities. They provide the mentorship, the thought leadership, and programming to help these communities turn their social capital into digital assets. A few times per year, Seedclub brings the most promising social token projects together in small cohorts as a part of its reputable accelerator program. Both of our last two episodes featured Seedclub accelerator alums in Cabin and in Kraus House. As opposed to a traditional accelerator, instead of asking for equity in direct exchange for service, Seedclub facilitates a token exchange. Cohort members send a portion of their forthcoming token in exchange for some club, Seedclub's token. This way, both treasuries are, quote, seeded with each other's tokens, and they hope for one another's mutual success. Campfire is produced by Cabin, which is a DAO building a decentralized city for independent online creators. All right, I hope you're ready to harvest some gems from this episode with Seedclub. Let's get it. Nicole and Jess, thank you so much for coming on to Campfire.
Thanks for having us.
So warm and toasty.
We'll get into what Seedclub is and all the operations, but first read a statement and want to gauge from both of you on a scale of 1 to 10 how accurate you think that statement is. And that statement is Seedclub is the Y Combinator for DAOs. Nicole, do you want to start?
With 10 being most accurate?
10 being most accurate, yes.
Okay. Oh, gosh. I feel like we're in our meeting ratings on our L10. 7, 8, 7.5.
Okay. Jess, what would you say?
4.5.
Okay, great. So using your respective answers for that question, I figured we'd have a little bit of a range here. In what ways is that an accurate statement, and in what ways is that inaccurate? Using this as sort of context to answer the question, what is Seedclub?
When I think of that, analogies like that are really useful, I think, to get the basics, to make it's a good meme, but I come from two angles. One, we got a long way to go to have anywhere near the impact that Y Combinator has had. And so huge respect to what they've been able to build there. And two, what we're building is very different. Seedclub is a network. It's like, what does an accelerator look like as a network? DAOs are networks. These are different types of organizations, and we get to do different things. And so we don't make investments into projects. Projects contribute, and there's a token swap that happens at some point in their contribution. And so our goal here isn't to go just build the biggest, most valuable list of investments. Our job is to build a valuable network that supports all of our members, and core to those are the projects and people launching those projects. But it's much bigger than that. So we are a network, not a firm. And I think that's the biggest difference.
Nicole, in what ways is that somewhat of an accurate statement? We had a 7 from you, so it's on to something, right?
Yeah, I think it's of the founder support and the wraparound services. So I think that's a big piece of what I sort of hold dear on a daily basis, and that the team that we work with also does, where we're deeply committed to the success of the projects, and we believe that this is one of the best places to do that. So I think that in that, there's kind of this similar thread of this is the place to come if you want to build focused around community and network connections. And so I think there, how we do that, and tokens and versus investments, obviously like still growing and scaling and figuring out like how we scale. But I think that what we know is most fundamental is providing and over-delivering value to the communities that come through. And so that piece, I think, obviously, there's a huge similarity there.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And that's helpful context. So cool. Again, welcome to the show. Would love to get from both of you just a brief introduction about what your role is within Seedclub each. And then also, I'd love to hear how the two of you met each other.
Yeah, so I run the accelerator at Seedclub amongst many other pieces. Educator, I think, is sort of what my job description said when I came in. And the accelerator, in some ways, I sort of look at Seedclub, and maybe this is because I come from education background. I look at sort of the accelerating what we do as there's the accelerator, which is this like thing that we do a couple times a year. But then I think that sort of all of the pieces within Seedclub touch the accelerator. And so sometimes when I say the accelerator, I sort of just mean like Seedclub at large. And so people coming into the community who are accelerator aspiring, and then people that come out of it. And so my work, I'm super lucky in that my work gets to touch all of those pieces. And I just stay curious in all of those pieces. Previously, I sort of came at crypto through the music industry, ran Open Music Initiative and Creative Entrepreneurship Institute at Berkeley College. And I also sit on the board of Ampled, which is a music co-op platform owned by workers and artists. And that's how Jess and I met. Austin Roby, who co-founder of Ampled, had applied for this little thing called Seedclub, had gotten into the second cohort and said, hey, do you want to do this with me? You're into crypto and why not? And I said, yeah.
Amazing. And Jess, I just listened to the episode on the Seedclub podcast where the tables are turned and you are interviewed. So I have a little context into the founding story of Seedclub, a Telegram, and the networks of folks that you were working with on building DAOs. So I understand and will have introduced you pre-recording as a founder of Seedclub, but talking a little bit about how there's almost this flat and not hierarchical structure to DAOs. What do you think of as your role and how you denominate it, but also in how you lead without necessarily the traditional managerial structures found in traditional Web 2 organizations?
Yeah, I mean, Seedclub started off as 11 people in a Telegram chat, and my initial role was just to ensure things were getting done. And so it was very much a service-based mentality from day one. Without a doubt, there's responsibility in there. And I think the building of momentum and I guess authority that comes from taking responsibility and delivering on that responsibility is I think where my leadership role in Seedclub has come from. And it's really what I try to maintain today. It's changed fairly drastically. I think Nicole grossly understates the responsibility and role that she has in Seedclub consistently. That's why I was laughing earlier, because I was certain she was going to do it again. But soon that will change, I think. And yeah, I think my role at Seedclub is one who gets to engage in vision and gets to engage in collaboration and support and coaching. And I both value the ability to go deep with 20 amazing founding teams on a quarterly basis, and then also support, the incredible human beings that are investing their heartbeats in building Seedclub on a day-to-day basis and how they grow and learn and support their teams. So I think leadership I'm not sure if I agree with the statement that there's no hierarchy in DAOs. I think there's lots of hierarchy. I think it's just more emergent and gifted or assumed. It's earned. And so when I look across the Seedclub ecosystem, I see, dozens of leaders. And how we all work together as leaders, I think, is the interesting, exciting work that we're doing, and the balance between the right, frameworks and structures and culture and attitudes and approach. I think it's like the fun work we get to do right now. And core to that is just getting to work with and bringing in amazing human beings, which is what we did from day one. And I've been pretty blessed to be able to do pretty much daily basis since then.
Awesome. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the pushback on the hierarchy phrasing. It's interesting how different organizations approach that question. So we may come back to that in a bit, but I want to dive into the meat of Seedclub and the day-to-day. And Nicole, I want to start with you. What exactly goes into accelerator programming? What can a founding DAO team expect if they were to join the upcoming cohort for Seedclub?
I spend a lot of time thinking about that every day. And I think that I sort of referenced that it's evolving as we grow, and it's all sort of rooted in this over delivery value. But what that looks like, I think, will continue to evolve. So right now, I think that there's sort of these three key ingredients, and we continue to look at the ratio and how we get it right. And of course, right also looks different for different projects because projects come in different stages with different founder experience. etc. So these three pieces, one of them that is always really fun to provide is this blow your mind content where somebody's coming in and really just exploding and reframing your worldview, whether it's on community or how governance works, how to think about a treasury in a Web3 non-fiat based world, how to build out operations and support the humans, what a hierarchy looks like, the superpowers of some of these token technologies that we're working with and continuing to build and evolve. So this is the piece where, for the Gen Xers out there, you think, but you have no idea. It sort of just disrupts this like understanding of how you're going to build something and continues to expand your mindset. The other two pieces are the support and network. And that's another, I think, real superpower that we have, which is that we're so lucky in that sort of Genesis Telegram group that continued to grow that Jess was referencing. Those folks are on our bench and we continue to attract just amazing people with tremendous experience. And so the ability to connect people, and then on top of that, to continue to be graduating out these cohorts of projects that are then going out and being successful themselves and having experience to and value to give back, being able to connect people with these coaches and advisors and mentors that can help them explore answers or explore possibilities to the complex questions is really critical. And then finally, the third piece are these sort of more tactical workshops and practicums where we're taking people through something that's really detailed. Some projects haven't set up their multi-sig or maybe have a Discord, but it's not completely optimized as far as emojis and bots and onboarding flow. So taking people through these experiences that once you've done it, you realize perhaps it's not so scary, but also it can be complex and intimidating to do it the first time and you want to get it right. So I think that we're continuing to build out what the right ratio is, especially as the space evolves. And I think it's going to continue to change as Web3 itself grows.
I love that. And in your answer just now, you referenced these workshops that you'll have. And I also saw on your Notions FAQ that you have these guided exercises specifically designed for tokenomics and token system building. And what exactly goes into that? How can you have an exercise without necessarily launching a token there on the spot? How can you practice for that?
Well, the functional launching of a token is not the complicated part in any sense of the word. You know, our listeners here can go and launch a token today on Mirror or Coinvise, and probably should if you want to go feel what that looks like. But the embedding that token with value and meaning and utility is the challenging thing. And then the economic model that's based on is like the next complication in that process. And so the workshop is much more of an ongoing, multifaceted piece that sort of ties into pretty much everything we do, rather than one, here's the template that you should use to go and do the thing you're trying to do. I think the challenge of articulating what happens in the Seedclub cohort is limited by the structure of being able to explain it, right? There's some bullet points and clear workshops that we can frame up, but the reality is we're still in this case studies, not templates phase of DAOs. The most interesting of these organizations will be interesting because of the innovation and evolution that they take. And so from day one, we approach working with our teams from that point of view, which is that there's no clear answer. There's a best answer for right now and for what you want to do. And so we're thought partners and explorers in getting to the right answer for now, and also are very thoughtful of the long-term possibilities. And I think giving ourselves a lot of flexibility and building composably, et cetera. So rarely is there any sort of one moment where you can say that we did this and got this specific value from it, and therefore it was a worthwhile experience to be part of Seedclub. It's hopefully more like a warm hug.
I love that. Go ahead.
I think it's also worth, who knows when that token workshop bullet was put on there, but I think it's crazy to think about that when I was in the cohort last year was really scary to literally just mint the tokens. So not where do you put it or what, but just what platform do you use? And Mirror, being able to mint a token on Mirror, for example, is super new. And so I think that this is also where we are super aware that we have to continue evolving this structure, because what seems hard right now, a year later, we're going to look back and say, now we have this tool, or now we have this matrix, or our projects that came out of SEO2 and SEO3 have now been around for a year. And so we have these more fully developed models to be able to lean on. And so I think that's something where perhaps I would put that 7.5 a little bit lower, because I think that the sort of like evolution of where we're aiming toward and the tools that we have at our disposal are changing so much more rapidly than, for example, in a Y Combinator type ecosystem.
Nicole, you mentioned that after folks finish the cohort and they launch their token and go out and have all this success is what you said. I'm curious what success means to the both of you. Is it just that they've launched a token project, or what are you more specifically looking at, maybe from a metric standpoint too, to gauge if a social community has learned what you hoped they would learn from Seedclub?
Why are you in my head, Jackson? These are the big questions that we ask ourselves, that we continue to ask ourselves. Yeah, I mean, I think that those are the pieces that we're working on modeling and framing out. So yes, is there a token out in the world? That's a big part of our model. And so that's, I think, a good first step. When we say token, I think we're now realizing that we can be a little bit more expansive there, and that token models are continuing to change. And even whether you use a sort of ERC20 traditional social token or an NFT. But I think that above that, is the token capturing the value in the community? Does the community have a clear sense of and a clear way that it's actually operating, where it's creating sustainable value? Is the community participating both in the creation and then in that token model where there's the value capture? I think that those are some good places to start, but then there's also all of these overlays of governance and community and operations. There's a lot of other places where you can start looking at sort of maturity and sustainability.
Anything to add, Jess?
Yeah, I think success looks like many more novel, incredible DAOs out in the world so that we can all learn faster together. That's the initial intent behind Seedclub, was that this initial group of people that had all these questions, and we tried to answer those questions. And every time we came up with an answer, there was more questions. The network that we're building at Seedclub is really about asking great questions, finding those answers, and sharing that learning throughout our membership. And so I think we're still very much in this exploration, ideation, imagination type phase. I think we need more of it. I sent out a tweet that was rather controversial the other day that said we need more DAOs, not more DAO tools, which was more focused on the former, not so much on the latter. I think we just have this deep belief that more brilliant human beings investing their heartbeats in this space is going to create really more great DAOs and more great opportunities and a lot more learning. So yeah, I'm very excited for there to be incredibly valuable DAOs out there that Seedclub gets to be a part of. I'm very excited for there to be examples of DAOs that just attract a whole set of new user bases and members and workers. I'm very excited for the fact that there's people who are entering the workforce today that are going to get to build a career working for DAOs rather than for corporations or for, in gig work, freelance marketplaces. But I think that the metric right now is just find great people, find great projects, and support them to be the best they possibly can be. And I think it is important. Our model is one where we become married, we become partners. We are co-invested in each other's success. And the accelerator is just the first little baby step as part of the relationship that we're building with projects in Seedclub. And our success will be modeled on our ability to support projects and their communities from day one through to whatever that ultimate massive success will be.
I have so many follow-ups. And Jess, I was actually going to bring up that tweet. Why is it that so many folks out there are building DAO tools instead of DAOs? Why is that happening?
Well, I think people are excited about this opportunity in the space, which is amazing. I think DAOs are really about battling against these inherited beliefs that we've just grown up in, hierarchy being one of them, how decisions get made, et cetera, in that world. And then two is how do you go build a valuable company or organization? And for the last 20 years, the way you did that was you built a company, you found a technology advantage, you pushed that technology advantage, maybe built a community to support that technology advantage, and you profited from any number of ways. DAOs and the landscape we live in today is providing another option, right? That other option is, well, what happens if we build community first and that we collectively own this thing and we come together, steward resources, social capital, invest in the pursuit of some big adventure. And that is empowered by this technology, which is tokens and blockchain that gives these communities shared bank accounts and cap tables and the things that could only exist in one part of the economy that can now be more international, accessible, et cetera. And so I think people are just very used to see opportunity, build tools. That's how I go go and build value. The challenge is that I don't just think we're still missing great examples of DAOs, right? We're still in the process of building phenomenal examples of DAOs. And so if you're going to go build DAO tools without there being really clear use cases for them, I think you're going to have a bad time. And we've done this before, right? Like the things that we see are, one, we need an all-in-one DAO platform. Well, guess what, guys? That's where we started. We had all-in-one DAO platforms. And the reality is that the way that they were trying to build operations or supported operations weren't the way that people wanted to use the tools. And so great to get us to the point where there was excitement and early users. But now that we have those early users and early DAOs, let's go build things for them, not how we think things should be. And so I think there's a lot of building for how we think things should be rather than building for use cases. It is like literally the most crypto thing ever. That was 2017. That was NFTs in the early days. It was early DAO platforms. And so, I think that the shift here that people need to pay attention to is, one, DAOs now have capital. And they're able to go and invest in the building the stuff. Cabin's building tools, Crowdsource is building tools, Seedclub's building tools, FWB's building tools. They're building tools for problems that they know they have. And so I think that's like most likely going to be the source of some really interesting innovation. Let's look at Yearn and Coordinape as a really great example of that. Phenomenal. I think that's one. And then two, I think there's a big question around what's the business model look like within DAO tools. And I think there's a lot of people coming from more of a Web 2 mindset and thinking, well, my SaaS product doesn't work here, but it's going to work over here. And I'll put a fee on top of it and it's going to yada, yada. But as somebody who's in leadership in DAOs, thinking through the strategic angles here, most of these tools are going to be open source. Most of these tools are going to be commodities at some level. And so the point of integration and where it gets made real is really where the value is going to be captured. And if we have somebody like an FWB that has an incredible product team that sees something that's really useful out there, but if they use it, there's a 2, 4, 5% fee on it. But if they fork it and build it in a way that's better for the community, there isn't, and it's more useful. Pretty easy choice. And so I think we really need to think through what business models and what structures look like. And in my opinion, they look much more like infrastructure, and they look much more these useful economic layers that get put out into the world where there is probably not a fee to it, but there is more of a threat to fee. There is more of like a native Web3 model. And, I think there's just a fairly big gap between a number of the builders that are coming in from more traditional Web2 and how I'm going to go build a tool and this new world. So that tweet was more an off-the-cuff remark, just thinking like the solution in my mind to all of this complexity is just more great DAOs. Obviously, that's what we're working on at Seedclub, so it's easy for me to say, and we're putting our time and energy and heartbeats where our mouth is. But yeah, and the irony of the whole thing is we do a ton of investing through Seedclub Ventures into early-stage DAO tooling projects. There's 35 or so. So without a doubt, we need more DAO tools as well. But yeah, it was fun. Get to be a little polarizing on the internet on a Wednesday morning.
I really appreciate that answer. It ties to another tweet of yours I'd seen about how in DAOs the network effects come first and then the product. So I do think those kinds of frameworks are interesting to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think it's a possibility now that networks come first. And we don't really know exactly what that means or if that's useful or how that's useful. But I think that's like the most important thing, just to recognize where we are today. Nicole, if you think back to when we first met, which was it's over a year ago now, I think. And just the distance the space has come in that year is just pretty incredible. But we are, I think, at this phase where there's a lot of people who have overinflated expectations around what can be done and the state of the world where we're in right now. And I think it's really important to have those expectations checked a bit. We're still in this exploration phase. We're still figuring it out. Anybody who says that they have a clear answer probably hasn't explored that answer super deeply, because the deeper you go, the more uncertainty there is. And if that's exciting to you, then this is the place to come build. If it isn't, then maybe you got to wait a little bit longer.
Love it. I want to go back to something else that you said a few questions ago, which is that in Seedclub, you don't invest in necessarily, there's an exchange. And so can you talk about how you arrived at this token exchange model, and what are some of the emergent dynamics you've noticed in your relationships with DAOs because of this exchange model?
We started off with the belief that Seedclub was a network, and that sort of a crypto network. And so crypto networks have tokens represent membership governance in those networks. And we both wanted to build a valuable, useful network, and also helps that would support the creation of other valuable, useful networks. And so the idea of leaning into the native properties of crypto networks was essential ultimately. And so we believe that the core sort of value unlocked from tokens is giving individuals membership or ownership in the networks they participate in. It's, the early Uber driver not participating in any of the upside in the IPO should be shocking to us, especially given the amount of value that they probably created. I think we have an opportunity to change that in the Web3 space. It was just from that initial principle. Also, Seedclub is structured as a DAO, and so it only participates in membership through holding other crypto assets. There's another mechanism to do it. There's some early constraints and ideological focuses, I guess, that led us down this path. We're lucky in that we were able to deliver an exceptional amount of value through bringing our existing network to teams. At least that's the consistent feedback we got, and we fight very hard on a daily basis to continue doing that. There is a clear value for participating in Seedclub, and then we look at the club token, and so teams contribute a portion of their tokens for that value and the resources that we've as a collective are able to bring to the table. And then for this model to work, we really want early teams to be aligned and incentivized to come back and support the next wave of projects that are coming through. And so giving them tokens as part of that to recognize and that relationship on chain is just, I think, a pretty obvious thing to do when you think about it. If we zoom out, it looks like a sort of a token swap. I just imagine these projects plugging in and there's being a membership fee that's being paid for that plugging in. And then the network is just, okay, how do we over deliver value for these amazing people that have just plugged in? And then once there's a certain level of success or a progress that's made, again, formalize a relationship on the Seedclub side by granting club tokens to that team and completing that swap. So not quite as clean as like a token swap. It's probably not the best way to frame it, but on a high level, that's what we're trying to do. Just mutually embed ownership and incentives at the organization level.
So, Nicole, I want to move the conversation to selection and how you think about bringing on new folks. But to kind of tie in Jess's answer there, are either of you worried, and Nicole, I'll start with you, that in this exchange model, you might be priming Seedclub cohort participants in the past to vote on other projects that are similar to them? So for example, if a music project goes through Seedclub, exchanges tokens, so they have some club, and now you're both laughing, and now they have the opportunity to vote on the new cohort, are they not primed to also select a music project? And how do you think about the dynamics there?
Yes, Nicole, how do we think about that dynamic?
We've never met, but you know me really well, apparently. All of my worries and thoughts. Yeah, so clearly, I came to Web3 and crypto from the music industry, and so definitely have a lot of networks in Web3 music. Additionally, I think that for whatever reason, music is just a great place to explore these Web3 models. I think that actually what Jess was talking about around sort of products being built because people have an idea of what users need versus users building products, the music industry is like such a ripe place for that. So yeah, I think that specifically with music, obviously we've seen a ton, and I think there's a lot of reasons around that. Zooming out to your actual question around curation and selection, it's something that I and we as Seedclub have been thinking about a ton when it comes to genre, when it comes to network, when it comes to sort of derivation of projects and looking at the community. I think that we see this generally within Web3, and I think that there's probably a lot of interesting community mapping that you could do as far as the sort of roots and genesis of these various projects. And so generally, one of the pieces of work that we're doing is around widening our curation and sort of discovery funnel, and then B, trying to figure out ways that we can tip the information asymmetry a little bit so that more people have better insight into larger quantities of projects, and then also looking at ways that we can scale up and increase at least sort of the number and the experiments and ways that we're selecting projects for the small number of people that ultimately are going to have a lot of insight into these projects. So yeah, we're going to continue to have token holders that are our past alumni. I actually worry a little bit less about those projects specifically in some ways, because those are the folks with whom we've formed these really meaningful relationships. And I think that we get to be sort of in open conversation with all of the various theses that we're trying out and the experiments that we're interested in seeing. And so in some ways, I feel the closest to those communities. And so I think it's just about continuing to have as many nets cast as wide as possible to bring in more experiments, and then continuing to have those open conversations with our token holders, of course, many of whom are those alumni projects.
Awesome. To that point, I'm curious if you could talk through what exactly is your selection process. And in your answer, is there any kind of rubric? So some context, my day job is with On Deck, and we have our own accelerator program that we've launched. And I think about traditional accelerators where we think about the founding team and market sizing and timing and like strengths of a community and unfair advantages that the founding team may have. So all of that is context. How do you think about selection and what is important to you when vetting possible entrants?
Yeah, and this continues to evolve the same way that I was describing those three components continuing to evolve, because I think that while there's some key pieces where we see success definitely stems from, I think the way that we get that information is the complex part. And way that we did this when we had 30 applications, maybe for SEO2, we had 80 plus for SEO3, over 200 and for this current cohort where we ended up taking 10%. So, some of the pieces that we know help a project be successful are strong leaders. And I think progressively looking at there being more than one leader. I think that having a complementary leadership team where there's strong vision and creativity, but also strong implementation and operations is really key. So just, can you get stuff done? Can you deliver? Can you show up every week and have a good understanding of what the actions are for that week, while also having this super far out what if mindset. So that piece is really key. I think having an extremely focused and clear call to adventure, as we call it, I think it needs to be both ambitious in scope while also having focus, which I think there can be some tension between that. How can it be so big and sort of world encompassing while at the same time laser focused? So really working on that. And then we are continuing to look at stage and community and these pieces. And I think it used to be that you could be a little bit earlier. I think that we're now seeing that we can be of more use if a community is probably a little bit further down the line and has explored their community market fit a little bit more. But a strong understanding of why community, that community is going to be part of what they're building is another core piece of that. How we get at this is a work in progress, and probably the application process is going to look very different for SEO5 than it did for 03 and 04, where they were sort of just evolutions on a model. So I think that we're going to continue to just run a bunch of experiments, and SEO5 will certainly be that.
Yeah, I think that last part is the important part here. We think about we're building a network, being thoughtful about how we bring people in as nodes of that network is a core function. And I don't think we have the right answer for that yet. And so it is one of the areas that we will hopefully continue to be very focused on innovating and experimenting and not tied to any of the past other than through some of the learnings that we're doing. So I would expect us to want to ensure that we have the freedom to run all sorts of wild experiments in how we engage our token holders and our members to help curate the next batch of projects.
Appreciate that. As we approach close here, I have two more questions. Three. One that's high level ideas based, one that's very tactical, and then a quick lightning round. So on the high level piece, Seedclub recently released on Mirror your values. And I found that very interesting because at Cabin, we're figuring out our values right now. At Cabin, we're also very much embracing emergent strategy, and we recognize that values are emergent too, depending on who comes in and joins the community. So I'm curious just to learn, what was the process for deciding on official values as a community? I'm sure it's different than in a traditional organization. The founders just sort of put them up on a wall. How did you think about building out those values? What was the speed involved in that process? And how did you ultimately decide on the ones you chose? For the audience, I'll read them out real quick. It's let's fucking thoughtfully go. Have an explorer's mindset. Build together. Build for long term. And you serve communities. So with that context, would love your thoughts.
Yeah. So I think the responsibility of early community members is to provide the frameworks or structures for the ongoing growth and success of a community. And I think values are an essential part of that. I'm not sure I agree with the idea that they should change depending on who comes into the community. I think they should be, the best values are filters for who comes in the community. And like great values in the corporate world, of which I don't think there are many, the best values are emergent and representative in how we do our work rather than articulated or decreed. And so the values process that was run was through a whole host of conversations with our broad membership. And one of our team members took that on as a main goal and was able to bring this sort of set of raw materials of values back to the table and started being like the early filter there. So yeah, without a doubt, they will emerge and evolve. To me, values are really the thing that if you read that list of values and you're a heck yes, that's amazing, then Seedclub's probably a great place for you. And if you read those and go, no, then probably isn't. And I think our job is to continue to examine those values and make sure that they do fit the state of the world that we see them in right now. But my hope is that they are good and effective at setting some initial guardrails as far as how we want to be and act and be seen in the world.
I appreciate that. Nicole, I have a pretty tactical question for you, which is I first heard your voice for the first time on the demo day that Cabin and Krause House participated in, and you ran this awesome, huge event there. It was really exciting. There were tons of people on that call, and it was on Discord. And so I'm curious why so many DAOs can continue to use Discord, including for events like this. There's a Winston Churchill quote that I like, which is that democracy is the worst form of government except for all of the others. I personally feel that way about Discord in regards to like communication systems. It seems like the worst one except for every other tool that exists out there. So how do you think about running an effective demo day, and what are tools that help make that possible?
I think the reason I laugh is, A, your quote's right on. And I think also B, it's such a responsibility and definitely one that we take very seriously to be setting precedents for things, even when you don't necessarily recognize that you're doing that. And it's often the sort of do as I say, not as I do, or just don't look over here behind the scenes too much, or in the sort of back channel where we're problem solving in real time. So the reason I mentioned that is we realized in real time that, which we obviously should have in advance, that, for example, when you're doing a stage with large numbers of people, you can't share visuals. And we had planned for projects to be able to share their slides. Why did we choose Discord to do this? I think that, and why do people use Discord generally? Again, show me something where you can have these many-to-many connections and where your identity sort of travels between community, which I think is really key, so that people can recognize, oh yes, you're the same person in also these other communities. And that has the open extensibility of bots and plugins and token gating. I think that right now it's the best worst tool that we have. And I'm sure that it's not something that we hope to all be using in the future. And so we felt like it was important to be where our community most was at that time. And that was Discord, and to really lean into that because that's where we had been doing our work. And the demo day was really, it wasn't pitch. It wasn't sort of about the shine and the gloss. It was about the learning and the building. And that's where we had been doing our learning and building. And that's where we wanted the conversations around learning and building to continue. And so doing that in that place felt right. Were there technical hiccups? 100%. But again, it's part of the process.
I didn't mean to make you talk about technical hiccups. I thought it was an awesome event. Like it was so energizing, and so kudos to you.
Well, and kudos to all of the people that were figuring out the issues in real time behind the scenes, because it definitely wasn't just me.
The secret is to have a DJ. As long as you have a DJ.
Shout out to
freedom.
Yeah, shout out to Captain's DJ. We have a community member named JD, Ooh. DJ JD, DJs nice. All of our big events. Awesome. So as we now approach close, I just have a quick lightning round to ask the both of you that stems from, Jess, your point about needing more DAOs as opposed to DAO tools. And you both have had such broad exposure to DAOs via your work in Seedclub and also Telegrams and elsewhere. So I'd be curious to just list out a few different sectors and get your quick take on what opportunities you see for communities to build in this space. And if you don't have an answer, you can say pass, but we'll go the order Nicole, Jess for each of these. And we'll start Nicole, with music?
Ooh, I think discoverability is huge, and just being able to access music the way most of us do in our cars with our families while being active. So I think serving up music that you are going to be excited to listen to, and then being able to do that the way that most people want to on their day-to-day life.
Cool. Awesome. Next up, climate.
We have some exciting projects in the space already. Climate DAO in our current batch, New Atlantis in our last batch. Yeah, collective action, stewarding resources, tying into DeFi tools, I think are all very exciting points to explore. And I hope we have, we're excited about the teams that we're working with so far, and I expect it to be a fairly big growth area.
I think some local-based ones would be pretty cool. I think we've started to see that, and there were some that came in that we were pretty into. So I think continuing to do some of the work on a local basis also will be super interesting.
Love that. Yesterday got into a very long 3-hour brainstorm on how could we crowdfund wind farms, tentatively called Wind DAO. Anyways, moving on. Political and social change.
Yeah, I'm going to stay local here. I think that I'm very connected to the various movements within Boston where I live. So mutual aid and a lot of the just human needs that people have. I think that staying local, there's a tremendous amount of power, and I'd like to just recognize the work that has been happening on the ground. I think that the people who know what humans need are often the people that are already doing the work. So community fridges and these collective actions that are already happening, especially through the pandemic, find those and then find how DAOs and Web3 tech can support. Because guess what? The community actions that we're doing here in Discord, a lot of that was built through those models.
I think DAOs have an impact, political and social impacts or situations generally. The big shift is that networks are how the most value is being created in our economy today. And as it sits in Web 2, individuals who create value in those networks do not get to participate in ownership. And so the fundamental shift that we're exploring here is one where individuals who create value in networks capture that value rather than platforms. And I think that is probably the most important political change that this technology will have. And so I think anybody who's building an organization where they collectively are focused on giving ownership to their community or are engaging in really meaningful political action.
2 more. Entertainment media.
Well, I just hosted a lovely chat with some big brains over in the FWB Discord yesterday on Web3 and media. And it was a wonderful conversation that really highlighted just how much there still needs to be built and figured out in that space. What I will say is we're seeing a lot of really large IP holders step into the space and start to explore. So I think it's going to be a mixture of bottom-up native Web3 IP through projects like StoryDAO or some of the interesting NFT projects that are emerging. There's a couple through SCO4 that should definitely pay attention to. But also we're going to see more large IP holders try to figure out how to get into the space in a meaningful way. And they're being thoughtful about it. So I think it should be interesting to see what results there.
Yeah, I think I'm going to sort of lean back on my music model that I think ultimately people are also going to be excited or not excited, but just expect and enjoy consuming media in traditional ways. And so I think that figuring out how to have these really cool participatory stories that people can still access in the various ways that we access movies and TV and entertainment in our day-to-day lives will be key.
Awesome. And then real quick with the last one, because I know we're approaching time, dealer's choice. Which sector have I not mentioned that you see opportunity? And Nicole, you laughed, so I suspect you have an answer. Do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think a favorite...
Music.
Has anybody heard of music industry? No. I think that a favorite where we haven't seen a ton is in sex and sex tech. I think that there's huge opportunity there. So especially women and non-binary powered, I think that's a very sort of overbearingly governed and litigated space right now. And there's just a ton of opportunity. So hit us up.
Yeah, I think I don't have a specific answer other than I want more weird, wild, crazy ideas. The best answer to this question is we don't have, right? It's going to be something that we notice when we see it. And I think we're still very much in that phase. And so while I think there's huge opportunities for, more taking some of the models that are working right now, whether they're social clubs or membership sites, et cetera, and kind of improving, evolving, growing those. I still think that we're probably have yet to see some of the big inflection points that novel, interesting project ideas can have. And that's what I'm most looking forward to.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for sitting around the campfire with me. We'll have to get s'mores next time. And really appreciate you both joining.
Thank you, Jackson.
I was eating s'mores, so apologies for not sharing.